Yeah, I'll call this meeting to order. It is February 27th for the City of Kingsburg, regular meeting for the Finance Committee, and it is 5 o'clock exactly. At this point, we'll open it up to public comments with having no one here. Like we can bypass that. Item 3, the approval of the minutes. So moved.
I make a motion. Approve it.
All in favor? Any opposed?
No.
And if everyone's good with it, we'll go out of order on this and skip down to number 5 first, which is the city solar project discussion. We can get started with that. This is a city solar project discussion presented by Public Works Director Daniel Galvez.
Thank you, Chairman Purcell. Good evening, Finance Committee members. Here today to talk about some solar options. I got Jessica Ritter here with SiteLogic. She also has a couple members, I think, on the Zoom meeting as part of our team. Just to kind of give a quick summary, the city continues to kind of look for manners to become more energy efficient. Over the last year especially, I think we've seen quite a big increase both in electrical and natural gas charges. And so the city has done a couple programs to kind of mitigate some of those increases, but you know, the fees continue to go up. There's a couple locations that we're kind of currently considering, which Jessica will get into, but just to kind of give a general outline, Well 13, Well 16, Police Department, and also the Public Works Courtyard. We are kind of facing a little constraint regarding the tariffs and NEM 3.0 and 2.0. We've got some looming deadlines. But with that, I'll pass it over to Jessica to kind of talk a little bit about each project, and then I think her and her team are available for questions. So.
Definitely. Yeah, nice to meet all of you. I love this cozy setting. This is very conducive to the discussion. And really, this is so preliminary. This project is very preliminary. We have preliminary layouts of designs, we have preliminary costs and preliminary savings. But this is very much still a project that needs your input for design, your input for locations. But we've selected a few locations that we think are the most conducive for what you guys are trying to accomplish here. Okay, we've got Charlie on the line. He said his connection is not amazing. So we've got Charlie Oliver on Zoom as well. He's our Director of Renewables, and he had a big hand in designing this project. So we'll just go to the next slide. I'll kind of run through these slides pretty quickly. Who's driving?
I got it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Perfect. We're just going to go over a few things, who we are, what we do, and then really talk about your project. We'll go to the next slide. So SiteLogic is nationwide. We're a U.S.-owned organization. We're a large energy services company accredited by NAESCO, which is the National Association of Energy Services Companies. I primarily work with cities, counties, special districts, so I'm all in the local government realm. We have 400 employees. We do a lot of projects every year. We'll go to the next slide, run through this pretty quickly. Our largest client base is here in California. California is a very green state, so there's a lot of incentives to build renewable energy projects here. And we have 150 of our 400 staff here in California, so that helps. Next slide. We're going to go quickly through your project. This project does have a positive cash flow, yay. We are designing and building it, so California allows for energy companies to both design and build a project using Government Code 4217. So typically, construction projects, you have to design it, bid it, then build it. But with energy projects, you don't have to do that. You can select one organization to design and build, and that's all around guaranteed savings. So when you don't do a project that way, when it comes to energy projects, there's nobody to guarantee the savings. So you hire an engineer and they design the project, and then you hire a builder and they build the project, but who's guaranteeing the production of those panels? Who's guaranteeing the savings? So that's where Government Code 4217 was born. The customers needed a guarantee that what they're buying is actually going to produce what the company says they're going to produce. So that's why we can build this way using 4217. And we do have a guarantee built into this project as well. Next slide. Perfect. This is the system. This is the design that has the most question marks around it, because as you can see, This is located at Well Site 16, but it is also in a beautiful park in a beautiful neighborhood. This design is a carport array, so it is up off the ground, kind of like you would see in the parking lot here at your school district or anywhere around you see carport structures, very similar design to that. But a lot can be made to alter this design. This is roughly the size that we need at this site, so there's a lot of panels, about 550 panels roughly, and we can kind of move this wherever you'd like. It could go further down the park, it could go into the other south basin over there. We could even move it to the basin on the right where you see just a little bit of water filling up, as a ground mount system kind of raised above that water level with the inverters raised even higher. But it's completely up to the council and this committee how that design will look like. I've seen some cities do really beautiful ornamentation on those steel structures, the columns themselves. One city, it was all about grapes and wine, so they had, wine grapes all in beautiful wrought iron coming down off these arrays and painted very beautifully. So we could do something like that to make it more aesthetically pleasing. But for now, this is a good idea of the amount of solar that you need at this location. The structures are pretty tall. They could be made shorter since we don't need to worry about fire trucks and everything else going out there. Usually if we're building in a parking lot, the low side of the array is 13 feet, 8 inches high to accommodate for emergency vehicles and fire trucks. But in a park setting like this, we don't need to make it that high. So we could always lower it. But again, that's part of the design that we're going to need some feedback from this council to decide, and probably the public as well. That'll be fun. Are there any questions on this design before we move over to the next?
I have a question about the height on the proposed. I understand it's 13 feet on one end, 10 feet on the other.
So for this design, we have 12 feet on the high end, 10 on the low end. And the low end is going to be on the inside of the park. The high side is going to be on the outside.
So they'll be leaning south.
Correctly.
So my question for that is, it might be for you. That is 12 feet from bottom to top, but when you're going down in the basin, that's going to actually mean, as far as ground level, let's say street level, how far above street level is that going to make it?
I don't have a measurement on how deep the basin is relative to the street, but it is a calculation that we can get you.
Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. It really depends on that slope, but we could move it further down the slope to kind of minimize how much you're going to see from the street level. So maybe it's 6 feet from the street level. We could try to move it as low in the basin as possible and even lower the height of the structures. Typically, my concern about lowering the height of the structures would be safety. People can vandalize these, but we're in Kingsburg, and so there's not a lot of that going on. I mean, you guys might know better. But I assume this is a very safe neighborhood, so we may not be as concerned about vandalism for some of the copper or some of the inverters that are part of this system.
I think the concern is the people that live on the other side of Skansen
Agreed.
are going to be walking out their front door and looking at what part of the carport.
The back side. So they'll be looking at basically the back side of the carport. They'll be able to see underneath the panels. They'll see the steel structures, and whatever color the structure, the steel is painted, or any ornamentation. So it may not be a terrible view, and there are trees there as well that will help obstruct a little bit, but...
But what I'm saying is, if it's 13 feet above, then they're going to be able to have a view to the park. But if it's 13 feet and then you reduce 8 feet, you're dealing with, like, right at the 5-foot level. That's exactly what they're going to be looking out their kitchen window, their front.
I see where you're going with that. Yes, it does. So I think that would be a key consideration when designing this, and we get at those people's doorstep levels, at their kitchen window levels, and look and see and take measurements. Say, how tall do we need this? We don't want the, if they're just looking at columns, it's not too bad. Yeah, they'll be.
So Jessica, is it gonna be closer to this? Is this how it's initially proposed, with this being Skansen and this being the park side?
Exactly, yep. And so see the picture up above, that's in the city of Parlier, to the left, top left. Yeah, that's Parlier's City Hall. And so they'll be seeing basically the people that are on the other side of the trees, on the other side of Skansen, are going to be looking at that view essentially. Now, how tall we make that depends, and that's a pretty wide structure as well. It may not be that wide, but essentially that's the view they're going to see, is these the cross beams and the underside of those solar panels.
And on that, specific one at Erling Park.
Mhm.
550 panels, but can you give me a rough estimate with the design lengthwise and widthwise, how big we're talking?
Yeah, Charlie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I can look it up real quick, and give you exact numbers.
Let me ask a separate question, Jessica. Does the 546 panels just offset well 16, or is there an overproduction there?
It offsets well 16 to the tune of roughly, let me get that number for you. 99% offset at well 16, and that's a $85,000 a year savings.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have that 550 panels, what is the projected output of 550 panels at that location
It is
in kilowatt hours for the year?
400, 742.
4742 annually?
400,742.
Oh, okay. 407,472.
Mhm.
And do you have the data on how many kilowatt hours that well specifically uses?
We do, yeah. Charlie can look that up right now from his end also. I know Daniel just,
So
did a.
the array, can you hear me, Jessica? Sorry. The array is approximately 50 feet, wide and 275 feet long.
Football field, right?
It would be football field would be 50 yards, not 50 feet, but, the length, yes, is close to a football field.
So, but I think so I guess just for our discussion today,
I have an answer to your question about the usage as well.
Oh, okay.
yeah, I mean, I think the discussion for today though too is trying to get this from a timing standpoint, right? So, but if this is just offsetting well 16, then it doesn't really matter what net meter, whether we're in 2 or 3, right?
It does. It absolutely does. So when you're talking about offsetting directly, that is where NEM 2 versus NEM 3 absolutely comes into effect.
Because your kilowatt hours won't be that 407, 472 is probably, if we're offsetting at 98%, that's why I'm asking
Correct.
what the kilowatt hours of the well usage.
So the usage is 403,293, and we're offsetting 407,742.
407, 472 is the projected offset?
Kilowatt hours is 400,742. See this one right here?
It's approximately 99% offset.
Yeah, and your usage is 403,293.
Are we only running the well? No.
No.
That well's almost 24 hours.
So the reason that NEM 2 and NEM 3, that's the tariff changes that's coming to PG&E April 14th. The reason that's an issue, Alex, is because we're going to overproduce so much during the day, and the grid is going to hold that for you to use when the sun goes down. And it's those credits, those overproduced credits, that are going to be affected negatively by net energy metering 3.0 to the tune of about 30%. So those overproduced credits will lose 30% of their value after April 14th.
So
So it's significant when we're looking at, an $85,000 a year savings. You could reduce that by 30%, and that's what you'd get after April 14th.
I mean, I apologize if I'm getting too far into the weeds with the numbers of it. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. If we're basically using the same amount that's going to be producing, I don't understand how we're going to have that offset when we're producing all during the day, but we're drawing at night, because we're not trading 1 kilowatt hour of feeding the grid for a kilowatt hour that we're receiving at night, correct? Those numbers are significantly different?
Charlie, I think
So
that
the
was
way
your question.
the way net energy metering as it stands currently works is they look at it on an annual basis, what you consume versus what you produce. They keep track throughout the year, but they'll let you store credits. So if you're right now, say you're producing during the summer months during the day and your usage is not that high, you're getting a credit at whatever time of day the solar power is exporting to the grid. And you get a credit based on the value of power at that time. There's different rates throughout the day, peak or off-peak rates. And that's how you're compensated. What's changing is they're devaluing the export component. So it doesn't benefit you as much to export power during the day. And they're actually setting up a system that they're changing the value of solar for every hour throughout the day. So it's changing the savings to you on an electric bill cost by about 30% is what we've seen when we change the rates to like tomorrow's rates essentially versus today's program.
For the NEM 2 and the NEM 3?
Correct.
So at
So I mean,
today's current rate,
we can run the model of savings analysis and tell you what the savings will be on NEM 3.0, and you'll see a drastic reduction in the total overall savings from NEM 2.0.
okay.
There's a lot of technical details that go into a project like this, but that is by far your largest producing array out of the 3 that we're proposing, and then 4 potentially that we're proposing. So this one is significant. So that's something to consider. We can go down. If there's no other questions about well 16, we can move on to the other sites. Go down a couple. Oh, there we go. Okay, so PD. So PD is getting their own solar arrays here as well. 69.4 kilowatt system, 156 solar panels. This is a carport structure as well. This will be tall, very tall, 13.8 on the low end. And this will, I mean, this is a pretty straightforward project. I mean, there's a few trees that might have to come down, but there will be plenty of shaded parking here. And we've designed it with that property line in mind, because we understand that the property line kind of ends at that middle row of trees there. So that's, are there any questions regarding this array?
This, again, same question, it's offsetting the police department use, correct?
Correct.
At 100% or close?
It is offsetting at 98%.
Do you have those projected summaries in the packet somewhere?
I don't, no, this is our information here, yeah. I could provide the information for you if you'd like, but
Yeah,
we
maybe
usually
we'll-
don't give away this spreadsheet this early, I should say. Okay, and this is well site 13. So this is a ground-mounted system here, just on racking about 2 feet off the ground. Very simple array as well, just offsetting usage at the well site 13 to the tune of 87% offset. Really, it's only 87% because we're kind of constricted by space in this area, but that's what we were able to produce here.
So this is, well 13 is just north of Ace Hardware, on the property back here, you know, to 10th would be out here on the east, but this is set back on the property. There's a fence here. I guess one of the things we could talk about too is, the potential for an elevated structure here that would allow us to get more panels.
Certainly, yeah, we could definitely do that.
Oh, to go over the existing
I mean,
well?
these are
GAC tank.
GAC tanks right here in the corner. This is our treatment site right here. So the old Del Monte's back here, which is now Sacramento Container, but it's pretty far back, set back, and so I just mean from a...
Now, from a cost versus savings analysis, anytime we build a carport structure, there is additional cost because of the structural steel alone. I think this is a pretty good cost versus savings scenario here, even though it's ground mounted. Yes, we could raise it off the ground, eke a few more panels in there and get you close to 99, but the cost increase as a result of the steel may not pencil out. So we could run that scenario for you.
Yeah.
But our guys are pretty good at designing with efficiency in mind. We call that value engineering. We're pretty good at value engineering. But we could run that scenario if you like.
So essentially, we put it on the ground because that's going to represent the best return on investment. But if a carport structure is desired, I actually think that we could probably carry the additional cost of the steel on this one if you wanted to, but it's just going to be a little bit longer return on your investment.
Yeah, I guess my thought was sort of more of like a hybrid where you kept the ground mounted where it's at, and then maybe there's another opportunity for something higher, only just so that we could get to higher offset potentially. I wasn't talking like a full, like a full replacement here, because I like that they're hidden. I'm just trying to maximize the limited amount of space that we potentially have.
On those, the only other concern, eventually we will need to have GAC tank serviced.
Mhm.
And so we require basically a semi to come through there and be able to navigate its way to both sides of that tank.
Okay.
Does-
Will you be
and
needing to
does-
get a crane in there for any of those?
Yeah, that's my next question.
So anything on the GAC site, no. Like all of this can get serviced, we just need a truck to come in. The only time we'd ever get a crane would be on this side where our actual well.
What about for
Mhm.
replacements? If you had to replace those tanks or anything, can they be pulled out, or does it have to be lifted straight
That
up?
was gonna be a question as well.
I think they were assembled on site, so they kind of came and they got welded on site, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't think you need to worry about anything there. All of our wellhead and equipment is on that end over there.
Do you know what the height of those tanks are?
No, but I can get that info for you.
I can probably get it on Google Earth, or be close. It looks like there's a street there, I can probably get a image.
I don't think it shows up yet.
No, I don't think it'll show
Oh,
up yet,
okay.
Charlie. You
Pretty
can-
new.
You can try, but,
Well, regardless, I think if we're flexible with the design, I think that we can probably get to a little bit higher offset, even given the current footprint, even if you added just a few more panels on each row, if you had to like 2 to 4 more panels on each row, you would be taking up another, 8 feet. But, you might be able to get closer to the 100% offset.
we
If that's
just need
what
to be
your
able to
design
get a
is.
semi-truck. We need to get a semi-truck between the edge of the panels and those GAC tanks there, Charlie. And that's the
Right.
main concern, is they need to be able to back in and out. So I don't know if we could afford another 8 feet on, like 4 feet on one side and 4 feet on the other. But we may be able to replace those ground mounted with a carport structure. And then with carport structures, we can always fit more panels on those structures. But we'll have to look at the cost analysis of it. It may not pencil out very well.
And then
Okay.
before we continue, there is one other site that
Mhm.
we need to discuss. So, the Public Works Yard currently has relatively low usage compared to some of our other locations. But it is a great site for solar just because of the spacing that we have out there. And then just kind of looking ahead of what we're gonna be facing in the next couple of years with the electrification of fleet, and also on our, landscaping equipment. All of that will eventually be electric. So we do need to find a way to offset some of those costs. We can project some of it in terms of what our fleet will eventually look like, and also what type of equipment we're gonna need to charge. But we are gonna be doing that charging primarily at night. So we will need to take advantage of those credits of producing during the day to be able to offset when we're plugging in at night. So, that was a conversation that started pretty late in this process, when we were taking everything into consideration. So we don't have any proposed designs or anything to that nature, but it is something that I think is important, for us to be able to consider at this time, so.
Yeah, we're still working on those designs. That was a conversation that we had last week. So he said, ooh, that's a pretty quick turnaround timeline, but we can probably put something together. Daniel, I think we should have some numbers for you literally by tomorrow, but I don't think, obviously it's not enough time to get it on the council agenda packet to consider. But I would say that when we're looking at, when we're basing our numbers off of what Daniel is telling us, we're estimating about another 200,000 kilowatt hours a year in additional usage from charging. We estimated about 20 vehicles. So that's a considerable amount of usage to be had at the Public Works site. So we're seeing that happening. It's going to, I would say you could estimate about another $1 million at that site, at Public Works site, to build a solar array to offset that usage and the usage that's currently at Public Works. So,
A couple of questions. Just so I'm clear about it, are you telling us that when we are producing during the day, we are getting an even trade kilowatt hour for kilowatt hour for what we're feeding the grid during the day to what we're pulling back at night? Even trade kilowatt hours?
It's not even, there's a non-bypassable charge. So let's say you were exporting power at a time that would be, 30 cents a kilowatt hour. There's a 2.5 cent non-bypassable charge that the utility takes no matter what. But you get essentially the rest as a credit for that kilowatt hour when you export it.
Okay.
So it depends on the time of day. On a off-peak time, you might be looking at, 15 to 18 cents. At a peak time, it might be 35 to 40 cents. The peak changed about a year ago, and it used to be from 12 to 6, which is very beneficial for exporting solar, and changed from 4 to 9. 4 to 9 in the winter months, obviously you're not going to have a lot of production because it's dark a lot of the time between those hours. In the summer months, you still get some during peak, but mostly off peak now. So it's at a, you get a credit of, it probably averages around 20 to 24 cents, depending on when you use power, the value of exporting.
20 to 24 cents per kilowatt hour?
Mhm.
Correct.
Do you, because we're on that topic, is energy storage an option?
So I can answer that question. Energy storage is an option. In this case, you don't need it because we're proposing all of these under NEM 2. If you wait under NEM 3, then battery storage won't just be an option, it'll be a necessity.
Right.
And batteries are very expensive right now. There's a lot of difficulty even sourcing the materials for batteries because car companies are taking them, Tesla and General Motors and all of them. So the solar battery storage industry is really being hit hard. And as a result of no materials, their prices are going up. So I would not recommend batteries for the city of Kingsburg based on cost alone. So long as you can get under NEM 2.0, you'll be safe, but post NEM 3.0, that will be necessary.
So for 2.0 versus 3.0, because I know we're on a little bit of a time crunch with you guys, how much approval do you need? Like, how specific does this plan have to be in order to meet these deadlines? Because, for example, I mean, we'll see when it, assuming it's going to go to council, but let's say that on Wednesday it goes before council, they support the project overall, they support the quantity of panels, but they do not support the location, and we're going to have to change location to, let's just say, put 550 panels at the dog park as opposed to at Erling Park. How much time do we have to make those adjustments and still make it under the correct NEM plan?
That's a good question. Charlie, I can
So
answer that,
I can-
but
I can-
probably answer.
I'll take that question. So the most critical component is the size of the system. In the past, they let us change the size. As of the first of the year, they don't. So we'll be pretty much locked in, plus or minus like 10%. Once we submit an interconnection application. The location is less critical. It'd be more ideal if we could have it decided upon before we submit, just because it's, twice the work to change it, but it's possible.
What is your drop dead date for needing that on your end?
March
March
1st.
1st.
Yes, yesterday. No, I was, I mean, it's just the sooner the better. I mean, ideally, if you guys were to give us approval to submit interconnection applications on your behalf, we would get them submitted sometime in the next month to secure the NEM 2.0 grandfathering. I would say that we have all the way through the design phase of the project, which is usually a couple of months, where we're developing engineered plans to submit for permit before we would have to be like 100% like secure on the location. And at that time, we would actually submit the plans back to you for your review to get your blessing on usually the 50 and the 90% set of plans before we submit for permit.
Right.
And if this same project, if those 550 panels were moved away from the well site to a non-well site, where they're just producing, they're not necessarily offsetting the daytime usage of that well, but if we're trading these at a 2 cents-ish kilowatt hour trade, how much less beneficial is that if those 550 panels are at a site where it's not being directly used?
He's talking about a
So,
respite.
right, yeah, so right now, I have the, calculations in front of me. I'm looking at your average, like blended value of solar is 23.8 cents. If you were to move to the other sort of program, the value at each site where you choose to do that would fall to probably closer to 10 cents. In comparison. So it maybe 12 cents. It's hard to say because it depends on the usage at the site that you select. And then also when the usage is occurring. So like an office building operates more during the hours of solar production versus like a well that runs 24/7, or a police station runs 24/7. So there's a couple of variables that would, impact the value of that system. But for general rule of thumb, I usually say it's about half.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is kind of in the conversation about the public works yard, is that there's not a ton of usage at the public works yard, and so when we originally had the conversation, it was like, this is not gonna ROI, correctly, right?
Right, so
But-
I can actually submit for, when we submit for an interconnection application, they ask us what the future usage is going to be. So that's where Jessica came up with that, additional 200,000. And that was based on a calculation that I did on, if you had 20 future electric vehicles and they each had their own electric vehicle charger that, obviously is utilized at night. But based on an, average annual mileage of a vehicle between 12 and 15,000 miles a year, that's what, and then, the efficiency of the electric vehicles, you get about a half a kilowatt hour equals a mile, right? So that's how we came up with the 200,000. I can actually submit for that system size and get you grandfathered in. Now, I don't know what the timeline looks like as far as when you'll procure all of those electric vehicles. But we could essentially, once we are submitted and approved, we could change to that system of RES-VCT is what it's called, to where you're offsetting usage at another site until the EV chargers and cars show up. But the savings obviously are much greater if you're offsetting something on site versus, off-site.
So through that program, the respect program, we would be able to offset usages at, let's just say, other wells, but it's at
Sure.
that 10 cents
We would-
lower rate, right? At a
Correct,
lower rate.
approximately.
Correct.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so you'd be able to offset the usage at Public Works, the existing usage, which is about 22,000 kilowatt hours a year, or 25,000. I can't recall off the top of my head, but and then we would, as you brought more electric vehicle chargers online, we would, reallocate the production to basically offset the usage on site at Public Works.
Correct.
But
So
the
this
most
is a
critical
little-
component is getting interconnection applications in now. So you're grandfathered.
So this is a sneak peek at the Public Works design. Daniel hasn't even seen this yet. So it goes right down the middle, and we're not finished with the numbers yet, which is why I want to give it to you in a package. But this is roughly the design. So it goes straight down the middle, and then all the cars park under it. There will be EV chargers underneath this solar array where, dual port chargers, as many as we need, and they will all be connected to this solar array. So it's large. I'm thinking that cost is going to come in just around $1 million, maybe even over $1 million for this site. But the savings will be substantial, especially when you have the additional 200,000 kilowatt hours of usage at this site with the electric vehicles charging. So the savings is going to vary, right? We're going to have some savings up front, which is going to be less because we're using a lot of this to offset meters not on site. As your EV fleet grows, the savings of this will grow and grow and grow as a result, because you're not buying that power from PG&E to charge, you're generating it yourself. So that's a little sneak peek. I wish I could have had the full thing ready for you today, but it was kind of short notice.
Yeah, it becomes the charging spot for the cars that we currently have.
Correct, yeah.
So I think another question you were asking is about, so there's an agreement in here though too that I think basically says, if they make a decision on the first, but then they change their, let's just say we make a decision and then none of it works out. So I think our we're on the hook for $30,000, is that correct?
No,
If we decide to proceed and they design everything, and we decide not to move forward with the project, so hey, you know what, it's just, you know, we don't have the financials or whatever it may be on the city side, then we're on the hook for $30,000. If we sign an agreement with them and everything moves forward, then that fee becomes part of the project. If their projects don't make financial sense, then if they can't get the system to work in our favor to be cost effective, then there's no fee.
Right.
Correct?
correct. Right. So the reason that we even have the letter of agreement and, with a backout fee, we call it, is because we're not in the business of doing work for free. Right? So I'm just being completely transparent here, right? We want to make sure that any customer that we engage in and devote a lot of our time and resources to actually wants to build a project, because we're builders. We want to build these projects, and this is how we make money. So we have the letter of agreement in place because it clearly defines what we're going to provide for you, but it also defines that and states that the city is very interested in moving forward with an actual project. The backout fee is to recoup our costs if the city is to back out at the 11th hour after we've engineered a project and gotten so far along in the process. But if the city is intending on building the project, the backout fee is not to be considered, right? We don't charge you for that, it just kind of goes away. So it's a safety net for us to make sure that we're investing our time and resources in where they matter. But it also safeguards you so that you know exactly what you're getting from us and that you're not spinning your wheels with somebody who's not serious about developing and building a project for you. So it's very much a two-way street, but yes, you got that correct. The LOA part is definitely, the interconnection application part is the most serious thing to consider right now. This is why we have economic criteria defined in this letter of agreement here. If we can't meet your economic criteria, say we can't design a project that, you know, meets the California Energy Commission requirements and the city can't get funding for the project, then you don't owe us anything. That's no fault of your own. You've used all of your efforts to try to get funding, but for some reason, if that doesn't work out, we're not going to penalize you for that. That was not your fault. So that's essentially how the LOA reads.
So let's just say on Wednesday, the council is in support of the 4 projects. But then we get down the road and well 16 comes out.
That's fine. That's fine. We want to build any project, so there's no specific dollar amount. I mean, all the projects listed here, say if you were just to go with well site 13, which is a fairly small project, pretty cheap project, we would not penalize you with the LOA because we're still making some money, a little bit. It went down significantly, but there's still a project to be had there, so.
If you don't have it today, it's fine, but for council on Wednesday, do you think that, it's possible to, on your projected program financials that you have in the packet, is it possible for you to give us a comparison to what that would be if these projects were approved under NEM 3.0?
Yes, absolutely.
And
It would be sad.
I was just gonna say, can you also just maybe talk through
Sure.
the savings and the cash flow under the existing, and then I think that would be helpful to have once you've got NEM 3 too.
Definitely. Daniel, did I provide you with a NEM 3 scenario?
No.
I didn't, okay. So we've done that with other customers in the past, and as you can imagine, it's a very, very busy time for us. But essentially, we could kind of go through that exercise together, really. But I'll provide you with a document. So this is our cash flow scenario. Everything in red you see is an outgoing cost, right? That's money going out. That's a loan payment, or that's cost for operation and maintenance of the arrays. Everything is in green is money coming in, either from your energy savings or from the federal incentive, which we didn't even mention, but federal government is giving you $712,000 back at the end of your construction project. So once construction is completed.
And that's on the 2.6 million?
Correct. Yep.
What's that percentage?
30%. So, and everything in blue is your net savings, both annual and cumulative. So when we look at the inputs, Alex, if you can scroll down, all the way to the inputs at the bottom, you'll see how we got to these numbers here.
These ones here?
Yeah, so let me switch it over, yep. Okay, so we've got our base project cost at 2.5, and then we've got, it says total project cost, but we always want to recommend some contingency. We never know what's going to happen under the ground. We know as well as we know, but sometimes when we drill for footings, we hit a boulder the size of a Volkswagen. That's unexpected, right? So we always have some contingency built in for these unknowns. So we recommend 5%. So then you add those two together and you get your total project value at 2.672. That's financed with the Energy Conservation Assistance Act through the California Energy Commission. That's a 1% loan program. And it says it's financed over 18 years, but really it's kind of stretched out more to 20 years. So 20 years at 1% interest rate, you really can't go wrong. It's a simple promissory note too, so it's not considered a bad debt loan. I use it on most all my projects. You can only borrow up to $3 million with the ECO loan, so there is a cap there, but you're under it. And then down below, under calculated energy savings, that's your annual savings for all three projects. So well 13, well 16, and PD. So $150,000 gross savings. And then down below that is our operation and maintenance costs. So it's $15,000 a year for SiteLogic to operate and maintain these solar arrays. That means washing, that means monitoring. If an inverter goes down, we come out and replace it or fix it. And that cost escalates at 3% annually with inflation. So these are the inputs, and that's how we get all the information up above in the cash flow. So if you want to, scroll up a little bit. So you'll see the first red column is your California Energy Commission loan payment. So it's $162,953 per year, but that's divided twice a year. So they ask for their payments in June and in December. You'll see that you have your solar O&M dashboard and energy services dashboard. That's the third column there. Incentives, IRA and state, 712, that's money coming in. Gross annual savings, money coming in. And then net in the blue is what's your left over afterwards, all the way for the life of the project, so over 30 years. So cumulatively, the project looks fantastic. In year one, you go a little bit negative to the tune of $18,000, but you do have your savings from the ECO loan the first year, and we only estimated a half a year's savings. But the way the ECO loan works is that the CEC allows you 1 full year after your system's been interconnected, so it's up and running and producing. They give you 1 full year before you need to make your first payment. So you're making your payment out of the savings that you've already accumulated, which is nice. That way you don't have to pull from your general fund to make a loan payment. So they're not like a bank, which is fantastic for customers. They're also very lenient. So if some sort of natural disaster happens and your solar panels don't produce, you're not required to make that full loan payment. This never happens, but let's say a volcano erupts in California and we are covered in ash for 6 months. Your solar panels are not going to produce, and the CEC is not going to require you to make that full loan payment. Only what you've produced will they require you to pay. So there's a little bit of protection baked in there as well. But
I have a question on that specific topic. I understand the volcano thing. What if the grid goes down? Because if the grid goes down, those solar panels are no longer producing anything, correct? Do you
Great,
consider
yes.
those catastrophic?
yes, that would also be something that the CEC would take into consideration too.
And does it have to be, what's the duration that it has to be non-operative
You know,
for that to trigger?
It would probably depend on how greatly that affected your savings. So you may be surprised, I mean, it depends on how long the grid is down, but if it impacts, so every year, actually quarterly, not every year, quarterly, the CEC requires us to give them a report on how everything's doing. So it's the quarter reports, and then quarterly reports, and then annual reports. So that's when we will give them all the solar data and say, yep, it's produced X amount for this 3 months, X amount for this 3 months, and then once again at the end of the year. That's how they decide how much you're going to pay back. So in those quarterly reports, they would see your panels are not producing. And then they would ask us why, right? Are there any kind of malfunctions? Did inverters go down? What happened? And that's when we could report, our grid went down for 3 weeks here in the area. It was chaos. They would go, okay. And then they would adjust your payment based on the actual savings that you did accumulate.
And there's a performance guarantee from SiteLogic, right?
Correct.
And so what is that guarantee?
Yeah, so our performance guarantee is for as long as you want to keep us doing operation and maintenance of your arrays. So we can only guarantee what we're maintaining.
Now it goes up, so that's this number here.
Yeah. So, So in that $15,000 a year is our cost to, of course, operate, maintain the arrays and monitor them. But it's also baked in as our guarantee. So we're guaranteeing that these solar arrays are going to produce the amount of kilowatt hours that we're saying they're going to produce, which will equate to the savings that we're saying that it's going to save. If there is a shortfall in those savings, we write you a check for the difference. so long as the shortfall is our fault, right? Negligence, or we didn't catch an inverter fail, and so the panels didn't produce for X amount of days or weeks. Again, a natural disaster, I think that's not included in our guarantee, right? That's something that's out of our control, but everything else that is in our control, we guarantee. So
So Jessica, we don't have volcanoes, but we definitely have forest fires.
we sure do, yep.
How did you guys handle those forest fires in your panels at some of your other sites?
Charlie would know. He manages all the arrays throughout the state, and we do a lot in Northern California. Charlie, was there ever any issues with our savings, our production guarantee on any of our Northern California clients?
I don't believe we had any, I don't think we cut any checks. I think that we were able to maintain an appropriate level of production, because usually the smoke, and I have solar, I live in Northern California, and the smoke usually only impacts for, a few weeks. So it doesn't impact the annual production very substantially. You're still getting some during when the skies are smoky. Some production, it's not nothing. But we,
So the other way-
annual. Go ahead, Jessica.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, the other way that we kind of help guarantee. Do you want to go, or do you want to go?
It is a 90%. Go ahead. It's a 90% production guarantee.
Yeah.
And we're usually a little conservative on our production. So what we're showing you today, we usually exceed that, which is basically in everyone's benefit.
Right. So like Charlie said, our arrays, although we model them at 90% production, on average, they're producing at about 105%, and that's just across the board with all of our customers. That's also how we protect ourselves too. So if there's a few weeks where the savings dip because of something, we're usually going to be able to make up for that somewhere later in the year when those panels are producing in greater quantities. So it's typically not an issue, but yeah, that's a great question. We do get smoke, we get forest fires, we get floods. We had one array that
one way we could increase. One way is to monitor we monitor the production, 24/7. And if there was an issue, we could wash the panels in extra time to allow for some greater production during, if it was, say, September was really smoky, well, we'd wash them after that, and you'd see a little bit of increased production in the following months, before the rain starts, which now we just needed to stop.
Will we be able to remotely monitor what it's producing at all times?
Absolutely. So if we want to go back to the PowerPoint, we missed a slide on there where we're talking about our energy management services, and it's that performance validation slide. So keep going. Almost there. Just after these. After the money bucket slide. Yeah, next one. Perfect. So that is the dashboard that you would have access to. So this is just an example. This was Paris, but essentially these dashboards they're really neat and they're completely customizable. So some clients want to see more data, some clients want to see less data, just depending on what you're looking for. But you'll see we can go back as far as PG&E will give us data. So for each of your sites, so you can click on any one of those years highlighted on the left side of and this is multiple pages long, but this is going to show you, this slide is showing electricity costs and the overview for each site, what it costs you. But there's also another slide another page that will show you production of your arrays at each site. So you can see in real time what the production of your arrays are, what production you're having, and then what that dollar amount is as well. So, this month, this solar array saved us X amount of dollars, so on and so forth. And so we can monitor anything with a meter. So whether it's an electric meter, a water meter, a gas meter, anything that has a meter, we can integrate with our dashboard here. And this is our proprietary software, but it's web-based. So you can see it from your phone or your computer, put it on your city website if you'd like to show the people how you've invested their tax dollars. But we find this to be very helpful, not only for you to track how your solar arrays are doing, but also for us to track how everything's going as well. So that's included in that $15,000 a year is this incredible dashboard. So that gives you a little bit of an idea how you can monitor It's a little bit more in detail than if you have solar at home, you probably have like a Solar Edge monitoring app on your phone, and you can see that's bare bones basic. This is next level, and it can get very technical. Most of our clients want it pretty toned down because they don't speak that language, right? They just want to see what matters is the money. How much money are we saving? So that's how our dashboards typically look.
We have an overall project cost of $2.6 million, correct?
That doesn't include, Public Works Yard.
Right. With a $700,000, let's just call it the rebate. So would that make the cost, I know we will be giving you a check for $2.6 million, and then we will be receiving alternate funding of $700,000.
Correct.
But we're financing the entire $2.6 million through that program.
Correct.
Is that what's being proposed?
Correct.
Okay. And we have to keep that either way under $3 million in order to meet the criteria for the program you're discussing?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So if we add Public Works,
It's going to exceed the ECA loan.
we'll either have to adjust it or
We'll need to find an alternate funding source for that.
Yeah, so, yeah,
with the $700,000 we're getting back.
well,
You, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's different, or, you know, I mean,
well, let's,
water enterprise fund, I mean, different things, I mean, so.
yeah, let's say that the project increases by $1 million. So that also, that 30% rebate that you're gonna get from the federal government is also going to increase, probably to the tune of around $1 million. So I feel like the federal rebate is going to pay for the public works site almost entirely, but you will need to hold a bridge loan for that additional amount above and beyond the $3 million. So let's say the project cost is $4 million. You're gonna have to hold a $4 million loan of some kind or internally in one of your funds until your project has completed construction and you get that check back from the federal government. Then you can pay yourselves back. But financially, this is the finance committee, you're going to need to know that there's going to be an additional chunk of money that's gonna have to come from somewhere, and then you're gonna have to be able to hold that cost, that money out for some time. I'd say it probably takes a year for construction. I'd say that's probably, Charlie, would you say that for a project this size, even with the public works yard, we're looking at about a year? during the
Yeah, I mean,
construction phase?
from, once we're given notice to proceed, I would say it's probably about a year, as long as everything, lines up well. And there's no, delays that are caused by, changes throughout the process. If we agree on a design and are able to move forward with it, yeah, the design is usually about 3 months. And then, it could be less than a year, but I think a year is a safe number.
If we add a project in the future, let's say we complete everything here, and then we construct a new city building somewhere else, and it's gonna have lots of parking, and we add lots of carports and lots of solar, is that all gonna fall under the new NEM program, or are we gonna be grandfathered in completely as the city for the remainder of time?
Unfortunately, it's just
Meter
per
by meter, yeah.
by meter. So anything new after April 14th would be automatically under NEM 3.0, and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
And then, and also NEM 2.0 is
Panel at every meter,
is
but,
valid, for 20 years?
we don't have
Is that
enough
the term for,
meters on it.
Yeah,
NEM
the
2.0?
the grandfathering.
Grandfathering is for 20 years.
So after 20 years, it'll fall under whatever, NEM 5.0 or
Yeah.
whatever it may be.
NEM 12.0, yeah, it changes like iPhones change, really. And we don't have a lot of control over that. What we can hope is that, California will continue to call themselves the green state, and, by then, PG&E may be bankrupt completely, and the state of California may run this grid like a PG&E. So it's hard to say what's gonna happen in 20 years. We know that utility costs are not gonna go down. We know that they'll only go up. But whatever net energy metering program they have then, who's to say?
Do you have any more committee discussion?
Just the next slide, past this one is my final slide, and it's just kind of going through our roadmap to efficiency. We're right here where the star is, right? So we've got a lot of work yet to do, right? We have to complete our verification of everything. Right now, everything that we've presented to you is very preliminary. We're really good at preliminary numbers. We know that our cost numbers will not go up, they'll only go down from here, so we will always present you with the worst case scenario. The savings will likely stay the same. But there's still a lot of work left to do. And also to get you to interconnection application stage, there's a lot of work left to do, which hence our March 1st deadline that we're telling all of our customers. So I think just in the last month, we've gotten about 40 to 50 new interconnection applications from customers just calling us and saying, please help us. So that's why we have to give our team a deadline. Our team needs to give our customers a deadline. Like, if you don't get us our information by this date, we can't guarantee we can get you under NEM 3.0, and that's just a bandwidth issue. So, but thankfully for your city, we've already got a lot of our designs done. We're pretty far down the line, so I'm not concerned about that deadline, but.
And you guys did a bunch of the work at the school district,
We
right?
did, yeah, we did all that work at the school district. Charlie, are you familiar with the scope there at Kingsburg?
Yeah, it was a while ago when we did those. I think they were ground mounted systems, as I
There's more
recall.
coming up now. Yeah, I think Chris just, signed another contract with them for some additional work.
Looks like they're expanding. I talked to Danny McIntyre at
Okay.
the elementary school district, and they're looking to expand some of their arrays and kind of
Excellent.
include some new sites as well, too, so.
I think I have a meeting tomorrow about it, at 8:30 tomorrow. Kingsburg Elementary Charter. I haven't-
So my colleague, Chris Bristow, works with K through 12, and he works in the Central Valley. I work with local governments only. So although I'm aware of the projects, I'm not super familiar with them. We kind of stay in our own lanes. But yeah, I know we've got an incredible reference at the school district, so that's good.
We add panels to an existing project, do we stay under the same NEM?
Ooh, good question. Charlie,
No.
how much of a change could we have?
No, if you add, it'll trigger NEM 3.0. You can add batteries, however, without triggering NEM 3.0. That's a possibility.
So if we build the police department one, and in 2 years, we want to expand upon that, and the whole array goes
Yes.
to the new NEM, or just the new panels?
If we connect to the same meter that we connected
Yeah.
the original solar to, then yes, everything changes. If there is a second meter somewhere, then it won't. And so we're doing that with other
Correct.
customers right now, because they're grandfathered into older net energy metering rates, which are great, but they want more, and they just so happen to have a second meter on site, boom, we're connecting to that meter. Because then the way the PG&E looks at it, there's nothing on that other meter, right? So it doesn't count. We're not touching the meter with the existing solar, so that's not a problem. But yeah, it's meter by meter.
Could we move panels? If we put them somewhere and we were falling under the 10 cents, you know, because it wasn't a direct offset, could we move them from there to it, or would that change?
That would change everything too, because wherever you put the panels, they're going to interconnect to the meter right there. So the meter is going to identify everything. If you were to move panels, which I wouldn't recommend because it's expensive to do so, but if you were to move panels to another location, they'd be interconnected to a new meter, and that's where the change would happen.
If the meter existed though, if we moved them, I don't know, just.
So if you first built them in one location and you interconnected them to meter A, and then you wanted to move these panels and interconnect them to meter B,
That both existed.
that both already existed, but they weren't next to each other,
Correct.
yeah, then everything would change.
Okay.
Yeah. You'd be subject to whatever net metering policy would be at that time.
Do you have any more, committee discussion? Okay, so it's an action item for us, with the recommended action to make a recommendation to city council to approve the LOA, the letter of agreement, and solar options and site logic. So I guess all we'd be doing today is approving for it to go in front of council for the same discussion again, and then, probably more questions.
Probably.
But
I mean, that would be the motion, not, we wouldn't have to,
correct. The motion would
there's
just
no
be,
direction that's needed, just the approval of the.
yeah, the motion would be specifically to, just so it's clear, the recommendation, the motion would be to recommend that the city council approves the LOA for the solar options as presented by SiteLogic. We would not be approving it, we would just be making a recommendation for approval and review at city council.
I will make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Well, thank you very much.
You got it, thank you. And Daniel, we'll get that Public Works design to you right away. I don't think there won't be enough time for us to get it on the council agenda for discussion.
No, but if you guys can have the
We
kilowatt,
can present it?
the kilowatt hour trade rates and the NEM number changes.
It's already on the agenda for Wednesday,
Okay,
Yeah.
so just adding supplemental information is fine.
I think we'll have it by then. So we'll be able to look at everything as a whole. Fantastic. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you, Charlie, for being available. Appreciate it.
Thank you for answering all those questions.
Bye.
You've got it.
Let's do the resource officer.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Since we brought all this muscle in here and made them listen to solar for an hour.
I'll get out of here. Thank you, guys.
So let's,
Well,
let's go ahead and,
there's gonna be solar at your PD. We'll make a parking spot just for you, okay? Under the array.
He's not sad about any of the trees, too.
No, yeah, feel free to take all the trees out.
Got it. Thank you all. Good to meet you.
okay, so we're gonna move to item 6, school resource officer funding and agreement discussion, presented by City Manager Alex Henderson.
Thank you, committee members. I'll just go over it quickly and then, turn it over to, Chief Dadian and the lieutenants that are here. Essentially, obviously, as you guys are all aware, the city's, for the past 3 fiscal years has been the recipient of a Prop 56 tobacco grant. As part of that, the grant has helped to fund a full-time officer to assist in tobacco enforcement, which has also allowed for the school districts to utilize that position as a sort of a dual resource officer. That grant is set to expire at the end of this fiscal year, June 30, 2023, and unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in securing a new grant. So given this info, Chief Dadian has engaged both the high school district and the elementary school district to discuss a partnership that would allocate a full-time sworn officer as a permanent SRO. While each of the districts have expressed a desire to see the position filled, they also understand the need to participate financially for the long-term viability of the position. But before we take anything formal to them, we wanted to discuss it with the Finance Committee and make sure that there was some direction from this group prior to bringing them a presentation. So, Chief, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so we've kind of been, well, I've been interested in this quite a while, and Alex and I have been pressing this for a few years. We had some kind of mixed feelings from the school districts early on. When I say that, I'm going back 8 years now. But as the school districts have been kind of used to the school resource officer that the Prop 56 is funded, they're interested now in continuing that service, and they see the value in it. What you have is just a basic framework for what we would have going forward. We still need to negotiate particulars, and, you know, that's, I mean, I have some templates attached to the template from Fresno County Sheriff's Office and Central High School. But it's a good kind of a boilerplate for us to use as a guide for a contract with the school districts. So what we're looking for basically is any guidance that you would have for us. We do want to share costs with the school districts. It is important that they have buy-in. I've said that a number of times before councils in the past. I want them to basically pay the bulk of this, but those are the ongoing costs of the officer, the one-time startup costs. I think we can absorb as a city, and it would be a good trade-off and a partnership with the schools.
Yeah, so we've included, you know, Chief has put together a breakdown of sort of the one-time costs as well as the ongoing costs that we would share with the school district, and you can get a sense of what the one-time costs are, which include hiring, equipment for the office or for the position, and then obviously the car and that outfit is the largest one-time cost for the city.
so this will be for one officer for the high school and elementary school?
No, one each.
Okay, so we're talking about adding 2 additional officers total?
Yeah.
Okay. So all of your projected costs you have here for a full-time peace officer, like the ballistic helmet with face shield, that $354, that's a ×2 cost?
Correct.
Okay.
And, you know, so, let me back up. The high school, I don't know what their funding source is, doesn't really matter. They're fully committed, they wanna go forward, they're very interested, so they wanna jump on this. The elementary school district, in our conversations with the superintendent, he was looking at a grant. I don't know if, he seemed to be very positive about the grant, but I'm not sure what the funding source is. If for some reason, you know, that doesn't happen for the elementary school district, it's not gonna affect the high school district, we'll move forward with that. So this is per one officer, but if we have to ×2, it's ×2, and each contract will stand on its own.
So we'll have a total in the city of 2 SROs?
Correct.
Okay. I like it. I don't have any other questions.
So you talked, you feel they will agree to the setup, or?
Yeah, so our preliminary discussion was, they got a little bit of sticker shock,
Yeah.
how much it costs to equip a police officer. But again, you know, my interest is in having them fund it, the officer and the costs. And again, we haven't got down to particulars, but my general thought would be to have them fund the officer, we'll fund the hard costs of hiring and equipping, and they continue on with the, HR, the actual.
Wage and benefits.
Yeah, there you go, thank you. That does include, a 3-year contract, because we have to sustain this for a while, so it can't just be a 1 year and done, type of thing. So, that answer your question? Does it
Yeah.
help?
Now, the officer, though, will be available to the city during school breaks.
Yeah, and again, we still have to negotiate that, but
Yeah.
my initial presentation to them, they don't really have a use for them during off-school, breaks, so they're fine with that, and that would kind of be the balance, the trade-off.
So I'm assuming, though, during those periods, we'll be covering the salary and the benefit?
No.
No?
No, they
So
won't.
okay, so the school's gonna take care of all of that
Correct.
and allow us the opportunity during off-school hours. That's what you'd like to, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make
So
sure.
Chief, I have a question about that, because schools paying for 1,440 hours of service out of the 2,080 hours that they're gonna use. That additional 600 hours is getting paid for by the school or is getting paid for by the city?
No, okay, so this agreement is just something that we added into this. This is the difference between FSO and Central. So I haven't worked out our productive hours.
Okay.
So this is all negotiable. This is an example.
Yeah, okay.
Is this amount, for a year, our cost, one-time cost?
That's a startup cost.
For the first year?
Yeah, that's the equipment cost.
One time.
It's
Yeah,
a
that's
one-time.
one time.
Out of if we have a contract for 3 years, that's our one-time cost, right?
Those are our one-time costs. Alma, let me help you.
I'm trying to understand.
I think what he's saying is like, they're gonna buy one patrol car.
Mhm.
We're only gonna pay that one time during the duration of this contract. We're never gonna have, that's not gonna roll into the second year.
Those are one-time costs,
Mhm.
one-time costs. One-time costs for the vehicle, these are ongoing.
Mhm.
They'll take care of the ongoing costs, we're one and done.
Okay.
Well, that contract though, is not,
So I think it's a pretty,
it's just a template.
you negotiated well with the
district's
school
willing to pay for
district.
Well, we haven't even started the negotiations, this is just my initial.
I like that.
And basically,
There will be
and plus, their vacations and stuff.
cover
Inside
these
the
costs
schools.
that are ongoing. For example, there's a first aid kit. If they use the first aid kit, I mean, we're gonna continue to Yes, okay, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, some of that stuff is gonna be
yeah.
consumable in nature.
Mhm.
We'll handle that, that's
Reoccurring, yeah.
minor.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. No. That's okay.
There's no overtime.
There's a rate.
There's a rate.
There's a rate, but there's
64 an
no
hour.
overtime, like, estimated.
I think it's probably a hard thing to estimate, because it's gonna depend on what the school's needs are gonna be.
Right, but I'll build that into the contract, whatever emanates from, I'll give you a good example. If we're dealing with a molest, sexual assault, something like that, something that emanates from the school, where we're contacted during school hours, I guarantee that's gonna carry over into the evening hours.
Mhm.
They'll just pay that, and that'll be built in here. Any extraordinary police services, prom, dance, football games, whatever, that'll also be, different, separate than this. Just like we're doing now.
Mhm.
Any other, committee discussion on that? Okay, if not, the recommendation is that they are just seeking direction.
If you guys are comfortable with us going to the schools and presenting this proposal.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea. I mean, this is one thing definitively that I think every citizen's been asking for, is SROs. I like it. Chief, thank you, Lieutenant.
Thanks for hanging out, guys. Yeah.
If you guys have any interest in solar, let us know.
You know, I learned a lot today.
Okay, so let's move back up to agenda item number 4, the mid-year budget discussion. It's gonna be presented by our finance director, Alma Collado.
Thank you. Included in your packet are year-to-date revenue and expenditure numbers for fiscal year 22-23, and it's part of our six-month review that we look into all line items and make a decision at what needs to be adjusted to actuals, and we came up to 27 line items that need to be adjusted, and there's 21 budget adjustments on the expenditure side and 6 on the revenue. We can go over every single one, and I'll explain that, for example, budget adjustment number 1, education assistance program. This amendment is necessary because it was created at the same time that we were working on our budget. And from now on, we'll include it on every budget, and we're very conservative of use. Currently, we only use 3,000, so we're doing an adjustment of 5,000. And then we have our allowance for 4 departments, and they're all in the general fund. And again, because it was granted, the our allowance for these departments after we had already adopted the budget. We have other items like utilities for police, just to reflect actual expenses incurred. Local transportation fund, we are adjusting it because we are doing a reconstruction of several downtown parking lots. And we are doing an expenditure adjustment of $175,000 that will be offset through the Article 8. Then we have overtime in several departments. Actually, is the same department, but it's in several areas. We have Measure E overtime and ambulance and fire overtime, and it has to do with, the overtime that is been incurred while they're assisting the wildfires.
That's reimbursable though, right?
Yes, this EOS.
So for like item 8, specifically the fire overtime,
Well, that one is Measure E.
okay.
Mm-hmm. But the one for fire and ambulance is usually reimbursed through the EOS strike team.
Yeah.
And then we have, we created a new fund for hospital tri-county grants. It's just to keep, track of the expenditures separately and the revenue. We have already budgeted revenue of $384,000 in our, current budget, but we're just, moving it, from fire ambulance fund to this specific, fund that we created. 120 is the fund, and we have to create, every line item to cover 6 EMTs and, paramedics. Other than that, the revenue is, going smoothly and, mid-year, and, we only adjusting 4 line, items in the revenue because the landscape and lighting mature, and we don't have any assessments for, any more offset. We had a sunset. So those are just, we projected it, I was ahead of the game, and now I'm realistic. I like, to be optimistic, but no, they had, been already matured. That's pretty much, it's, only 27 adjustments, just to, be more transparent. So the recommendation action is that we propose the amendments and recommend, this amendments to city council.
Any council or committee discussion on this? Can I get a motion?
I'll make, that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to item 7. Any other business?
No.
No? Our favorite item, item number 8, to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.